The French Revolution explained how France lost its head, literally. What do you get when you mix powdered wigs, starvation, scandalous gossip, and one very confused nobleman named the Marquis de la Foofayette? A revolution, but not just any revolution. A full-blown, head-rolling, pike-waving drama that would turn France upside down and echo across the globe. In this wildly dramatic tale of royal blunders, awkward wedding nights, and economic tantrums in silk trousers, we ask, how did a tankard of beer spark a century-shaking uprising? Why did the people of Paris storm a prison looking for gunpowder and leave with the governor's head instead? What made the National Assembly look at violence and say, now that's what we call progress? We'll uncover how France, a nation of beauty and brilliance, rotted from the inside, ignoring cries for help until the poor came knocking on palace gates with breadless bellies and revolutionary rage. You'll meet kings with no clue, queens with a shopping addiction, bathtub-bound journalists yelling for executions between cuddles with a rubber duck, and a declaration of human rights that somehow forgot half the humans. This isn't just history. This is the ultimate drama, told with a guillotine's edge of wit and a full court of chaos. Stick around, because by the time we get to the bit where the queen nearly escapes angry mobsters through a secret passageway in her boudoir, you'll be yelling, "Let them eat the next episode." Marquis de la Foofayette, an exaggerated, overly powdered parody of real-life Marquis de Lafayette, except this version spends more time admiring his reflection than forming revolutions. Born into luxury, raised on spoon-fed ego and fencing lessons, he's the kind of noble who mistakes peasant tears for seasonal rain and believes the universe revolves around his powdered cheekbones. Flaws? Oh, countless. Mistakenly believes wine is a food group. Thinks taxes are a type of poor person's cologne. Once tried to duel a goose, it won. And like most nobles, cannot boil water, but can recite Latin poetry for hours. When Louis XVI, then teenage Louis Capet, married Marie Antoinette in 1770, the union was less about love and more about geopolitics. France and Austria were basically saying, we fought a lot before, let's marry our teenagers and pretend it's fine. Now royal weddings were the Met Gala meets Game of Thrones, extravagant, expensive, and wildly uncomfortable. But nothing topped the bedding ceremony, an actual moment where guests paraded into the royal bedroom to cheer on the couple as they began the process of baby-making. Why was this normal? Because public consummation proved legitimacy. If France was going to stake its future on one royal baby, you bet nobles wanted first-hand evidence. Awkward? Traditional? Also yes. And thus the room jeered, "You better give us an heir, you fat, ill-bred boy." Nighty-night. Trauma. France was a cultural icon, fashion, art, cuisine, architecture. If Instagram existed, Versailles would break the algorithm. But behind the powdered perfection was a crumbling core. Centuries of lavish spending, tax exemption for nobles and clergy, war debts, especially from losing to Britain in the 7 Years' War. And a poor class that made up 80% of the population, treated like medieval background characters. Despite this, the elite continued. Should we stop partying? Heck no. Party harder. This wasn't denial, it was policy. In a smoky tavern, a drenched peasant's existential crisis came spilling out with each gulp. Why do the nobles get to be rich just because they were born? Chill. Why do we even need a king? And thus the Enlightenment was born. Not with trumpets, but with burps and beer foam. Great minds like Rousseau, Montesquieu, and Voltaire were already stirring up trouble with radical ideas. Liberty, equality, separation of powers. But now these weren't just topics for salons. They were echoing from taverns to tenements. When Louis XIII died of smallpox in 1774, his grandson Louis Capet became King Louis XVI at 20. Insecure, indecisive, and socially awkward, Louis was not built for crisis mode. More interested in locksmithing than legislation, he had the unfortunate luck of inheriting a bankrupt treasury, an angry, starving population, and an expectation to fix it all while fathering an heir ASAP. So, naturally, one of his first moves was to fund the American Revolution. Hey, America, want to beat Britain? Heck yes. Here's a blank check. Americans got liberty. France got receipts. When Louis turned around and asked for repayment, hey, remember all that gold I gave you? Oops, tunnel's breaking up. Gotta go. Best of luck. So to recap why the revolution exploded like a firework in a bakery. France was flat broke. but the rich were richer than ever. The monarchy was incompetent, oblivious, or both. Commoners had no bread, literally, and the Enlightenment whispered, "You don't have to take this." The guillotine didn't drop out of nowhere. It was sharpened by centuries of inequality, crowned with a royal wedding, and pushed forward by a soaked, slightly buzzed peasant yelling, "This is bull." France was already bleeding money from war losses, royal spending, and the world's most luxurious real estate portfolio. But instead of tightening the diamond-encrusted belt, the nobility turned to their favorite cure-all: denial through parties. Versailles was still the venue of choice for theme nights like Champagne Tsunami and Masquerade of Extreme Avoidance. Born to Empress Maria Theresa of Austria and Francis I, Marie Antoinette was practically raised in corsets and royal etiquette. Sent to France at 14, she was supposed to play nice and unite two historical enemies through marriage. But Versailles transformed her from a shy teen into an 18th-century fashion influencer with a spending problem. Her hobbies included designing hairstyles so grand that one literally held a model ship, naval couture, darling. Gambling like a Bond villain, ignoring growing unrest while reinventing the selfie, painted, of course. So naturally, she earned the nickname Madame Deficit. The treasury was leaking faster than a leaky Louis, and Marie just kept sewing pearl-encrusted saddle covers. Now royalty is supposed to provide heirs like bread at breakfast. But Louis XVI waited a suspiciously long time to consummate the marriage. Why? Was he shy? Was he uninterested? Was he just too into doorknobs and locks? Whichever it was, the court gossiped like high schoolers at prom. Pamphlets popped up, ridiculing Marie as a scandalous court flirt and Louis as, well, impotent as a dry baguette. Not a good look for the image of divine monarchy. People were starving, taxes were rising, and the only thing trickling down was gossip. As France's financial situation spiraled, the monarchy's approval rating made soggy cabbage look beloved. And the king? Faced with economic ruin, he proposed one stunning solution. Let's tax the poor more. Brilliant silence fills the room. Here's where things became an absurdist comedy of exploitation. Income tax, head tax, salt tax, window tax, that's right. Eyes to the world, gonna cost ya. Even the church was in on it. Clergy collected tithes supposedly for God, but suspiciously always ended up with new fountains and bell towers made of marble. Then came the private tax collectors, glorified bounty hunters with ledgers and fists. If you bought salt, taxed, stored salt, double taxed, breathed near salt, pay up, peasant. Even children weren't spared. Little Timmy's salty tears? That'll be extra. Peasants were legally required to give up a huge share of their harvest to nobles. As if that wasn't enough, they had to participate in the corvée, a labor tax meaning congrats, you're building that road for free. Consistency? Ha! One village paid 4 taxes, another paid 20. Nobles? Paid roughly 0. Naturally, this did not sit well. Just when things couldn't get worse, boom. Weather. Harsh winters, brutal droughts, crops failed like a student who forgot the test even existed. With grain stocks low, the price of bread, the cornerstone of the French diet, skyrocketed. One loaf could cost a week's wage. For nobles, it was mildly annoying. For peasants, it was existential doom. The result? Bread riots, bakery raids, bakers hanged. Wheat vengeance is a dish best served crusty. Women led the charge, storming streets, demanding flour, and flipping the social order like overcooked crepes. Faced with apocalypse, famine, and angry mobs, Louis finally decided to summon the Estates General, France's version of a group project where only the rich kids got a say. It hadn't met in 175 years, which is either bold neglect or impressive procrastination. It had no real power, but Louis figured, hey, maybe they'll solve things for me. Spoiler, they didn't, but they did open Pandora's box of rebellion. The Estates General was made up of the First Estate, clergy, prayers and 0 taxes; the Second Estate, nobility, parties and 0 taxes; the Third Estate, everyone else, 98% of France taxed to tears. And that, my friend, is where this powder keg nation truly starts to explode. Let's take attendance. The First Estate, the clergy. Wealthy, powerful, and suspiciously close to God's purse strings. The Second Estate, nobility, born with silver spoons and allergic to taxes. The Third Estate, literally everyone else. Peasants, workers, merchants. 98% of the population and 0% of the respect. Now imagine these 3 groups in a meeting where decisions are made by vote. Naturally, you'd think 98% of the population should get a say, right? Wrong, said the powdered wig brigade. Each estate got one vote. So 130,000 clergy equals one vote. 350,000 nobles equals one vote. 27 million commoners equals still just one vote. And surprise, the two upper estates always voted together. Raise taxes on the third estate. All in favor? 2-1. Motion passed. Also, we are not poo-poo heads. Truly, democracy was thriving. Tired of being outvoted and outmaneuvered, the third estate decided, if we're 98% of the nation, why don't we run the nation? Cue dramatic music. They declared themselves the National Assembly. It wasn't just rebellion, it was a rebranding. The government, but make it relatable. And how did the king respond? Locks them out of the meeting building. Let's see you hold a revolution now, you raggedy peasants. So they took their wigs and ideas down the street and broke into a nearby indoor tennis court. Because if you're going to start toppling monarchies, do it with style. Inside the court on June 20th, 1789, the National Assembly vowed to keep meeting until France had a new constitution, preferably one where you didn't need to own a castle to matter. Among these rebels were two rising stars, Maximilien Robespierre, a sharp-tongued, cold-eyed lawyer with a heart full of ideals and a closet full of paranoia. Georges Danton, loud, passionate, brawler of a man who could rally a crowd like a rock star at a revolution concert. Soon, even some nobles and clergy joined the cause. That's when things got a little spicy. A hardcore faction within the assembly formed the Jacobin Club, political radicals who didn't just want reforms. They wanted the king gone. No more monarchic dabbling. No more silk cushions of indecision. The guillotine was sharpening in the shadows. And with radical ideas came mass fear. The king feared the people. The people feared the king. Everyone feared bread prices. To calm himself, Louis did the totally not terrifying thing of summoning troops to surround Paris. Picture it, rumors flying that the king is about to crack down. The finance minister, one of the few actually trying to help, is fired. Troops are marching. The people? Panicked, starving, raging. Screw negotiations, they said. Let's do revolution instead. And so they formed the bourgeois militia, soon formalized as the National Guard. Not armed with selfies and hashtags, but muskets and purpose. And then, boom, troops from the Royal Military began defecting to the people's side. Early morning, July 14th, 1789. A crowd stormed the Hôtel des Invalides, a military hospital and armory. They got rifles, but no gunpowder. Just vibes and rage, but they knew where the powder was stored. Enter the Bastille. The Bastille was a fortress prison looming over Paris. It housed political prisoners, secrets, and more importantly, gunpowder. But to the people, it symbolized everything wrong with the old regime: oppression, secrecy, tyranny. It was a concrete middle finger to liberty. So mid-morning, revolutionaries gathered, armed and furious, demanding powder and respect. The warden tried diplomacy. The people tried explosions. Guess who won? The Bastille fell, heads rolled, guards were beheaded, and one poor noble's head was paraded through the streets on a pike, garnished with a revolutionary hat like a macabre fruit kebab. And with that, France's revolution didn't just begin. It erupted. The crowd, seething, starving, and suspiciously well-informed about the location of royal gunpowder, surrounds the Bastille and says, quite politely at first, "Governor Delaunay, would you mind surrendering the prison and, oh yes, handing over the gunpowder? Mercy." Governor Delaunay, sipping his espresso, replies, "Ha! No way." But instead of firing cannons, he invites a few revolutionaries inside for negotiations, which was 18th century French for "I'm totally stalling because this is terrifying." Outside, the people are restless. The word negotiate turns into detonate, and the mob storms the gates. It's chaos, cannon smoke, and chaos again. The Bastille crumbles from the inside. The people win. "Your Majesty, the people have surrounded the Bastille." Louis leans back and sniffs dismissively. "Governor Delaunay will handle them. No need to worry." "Well, sire," the crowd appears to be walking away from the Bastille. "See, victory. Except, isn't that Governor Delaunay's head on a pike?" Long pause. He must have transformed into a pike-headed celestial symbol of peace. Truly inspiring. I love that for him. I'll be in the royal carriage, bye. Zoom. Now the National Assembly had options. Option 1, denounce the violence and hope for calm. Option 2, see a severed head and say, "That's revolutionary fan art, and we are here for it." They chose option 2. And boom, violence was now revolution chic. Bloodshed? Not just acceptable, encouraged even. Some historians argue that moment cemented violence as the official language of liberty. Now let's talk about Jean-Paul Marat, philosopher, scientist, full-time rage machine, part-time bathtub inhabitant due to a hideous skin condition. He couldn't attend riots, so he wrote them instead. His paper, L'Ami du Peuple, Friend of the People, screamed headlines like, "The king will murder us all, cut off 1,000 heads. Wait, hey Mr. Squeaky, you good? Yes? Cool. Anyway, cut off 1,000 more." Yes, the man paused mass execution manifestos to kiss a rubber ducky. But here's the kicker. His pamphlet was the bestseller in revolutionary Paris. His fury fueled fear. Fear became fury. Loop forever. In August 1789, the National Assembly, with help from America's Enlightenment expert, Thomas Founding Father Jefferson, passed the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. It promised liberty, equality, and the right to not be randomly beheaded by aristocrats. But when it said men, it meant men. No rights for women, no cake for Marie, no break for the starving. Still, this document went on to inspire revolutions worldwide, even if it forgot half the population. Oopsie. Back in the real world, people didn't want liberty as much as they wanted bread, which now cost more than a Rolex. Why? Failed harvests, poor distribution, hoarding by the elite, and no Uber Eats, and the king, lounging 20 kilometers away in Versailles, surrounded by gold toilets and foie gras fountains, absolutely oblivious. 7,000 women had had it. They grabbed broomsticks, farm tools, and rage and marched 20 kilometers from Paris to Versailles. Along the way, tens of thousands joined. Louis stared from the balcony. What are those things? They're the poor, sire. They don't look like their portraits. They say they're hungry. Tell them, let them eat Taco Bell Crunch Wrap Supreme. They're not that desperate, sire. Some broke into the palace. Guards died, heads went on pikes. Again, Marie Antoinette narrowly escaped through a secret passage. And finally, Louis gave in. He promised to work with the revolutionary government and moved to Paris, carted there like a trophy. And so, the revolution wasn't just changing politics, it was rewriting the entire DNA of France. The clergy, the nobility, and everybody else had gone from politely disagreeing to cutting off heads, toppling monarchs, and dancing on the ruins of empire. This was no longer about votes, it was about vengeance. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens when Robespierre takes the wheel. Turn on notifications for more scandals, satire, and severed symbolism. And drop a comment if you'd personally kiss Mr. Squeaky. History's never been so hilariously horrifying. Vive la revolution, and long live your binge-watching stamina.